Howdy, and welcome to Early Reflections, the podcast where young folks talk about making it in the sonic arts. I'm your host, Adam Daniel Jones, and my guest today, all the way from the beautiful country of Norway, is my good friend Idun Nicoline. Idun, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm hanging in there. My heart's beating. I'm alive thus far.
Yep.
So at this point in history, in life, it's as much as I can count on, and as much as I can ask for.
Yep. I feel that. I feel
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So real quick before we kind of get into it, what are some good pronouns that I can use to refer to you as?
She, her.
She, her. Great.
Those are good.
So,
Yeah.
for our audience, anybody who's not familiar, Eden, you are a producer, composer, a songwriter, engineer, a guitarist, a singer. What else would you kind of describe yourself as, creatively?
Like all these fancy titles. Like um I mean, I feel like you pretty much covered it. Like I wouldn't say like, "Oh, I'm a guitarist," you know?
Mm,
But definitely like mostly singer, songwriter, producer is like what I'm like focusing on
yeah, totally.
mostly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's great. Yeah, but yeah, I think it's so fun. Like I think I've mentioned this in the last two episodes of the podcast, but like I feel like for you as an artist, like I know that I have a different relationship to it sort of because I don't necessarily spend I'm not like a songwriter at all. I'm barely a composer is what I would say, but I think it's kind of nice to have that a lot of different facets and a lot of like good tool sets like in your arsenal for being even a singer songwriter. Like I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but I'm sure like for looking at how to evolve your sound and sort of like eyeing your progression as an artist, I'm sure that that kind of stuff is probably like really freeing to have.
Yeah, it definitely makes you able to kind of like direct like where you want your music to go and not depend so much on everyone else around you. Like for the longest time I like didn't have a drummer.
Yeah.
And so and I wasn't like that much into recording, so all of my music just didn't have drums. I wasn't even thinking about like what I would do. But then when I started producing more, it was like, oh, well, now I can kind of like focus on the rhythmic like part of it too. And
Mhm.
so I guess you just kind of like, you're more able to find your sound rather than like a bunch of people sound together. Even though
Yeah.
that's cool too, but that's more like a band kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's regardless, like you're gonna be feeling like creative energy, like if you're in a room with people,
Yeah.
it's kind of inevitable. But and it also I feel like like amplifies those abilities. Like if you're by yourself, if you're kind of on your own, sort of narrowing like, oh, like this is what I want to get better at, this is what I feel that I'm good at, like that kind of stuff can, circle back and can just increase your ability with even with working with like a band. Like
Yeah.
I'll say for you, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but that was my experience like playing with you.
Yeah, like definitely. And like having like a dad who plays guitar as
Mm,
well, like I've always had like instruments available. So I
yeah.
haven't been like, I've been like, oh, I need like a solo or a riff. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna pick up the guitar because it's here. Doesn't mean that I'm like great at it, but
Yeah.
at least like I'm able to like translate what I want. And then I can just have like an actual guitarist like play
Yeah.
it back later.
Yeah, exactly. It's like again, it's like looking at it as tools, and
Yeah.
they're not diehard like necessary tools, but they like they'll inspire some different kind of idea. So that's really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Super
So
fun.
you kind of touched on it a little bit, but so you mentioned that your dad was a guitarist. And I've known that from meeting him a couple times. But so sort of talk to me about like how musical your upbringing was and like how much, music was a part of your childhood, listening to it, playing it, whatever. And then maybe sort of through like towards your adulthood and like what kind of drove you to considering music like to go into as a career.
Yeah, I mean, I've always like grown up like listening to a lot of music, like especially with my dad being so into it. He's always had been like, "Oh, let's like listen to records," and like, and he's been like teaching me to play guitar, and he's been singing in a choir. So like there's always been music, and he's been like, yeah, always kind of trying to make us interested in it as well.
Yeah.
And then like my sister's super into music. She's been doing musical theater for forever.
Oh yeah.
Um and so, and also when I was, I think maybe like 8 or something like that,
Mhm.
um I started playing flute in
Oh,
like a
nice.
school band kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um it definitely wasn't like my biggest interest. Like I liked the music aspect, but like the flute part wasn't really, you know,
No.
and we had this like concert with this like famous Norwegian singer,
Mm.
um where she asked like, "Oh, can anyone sing like background?" And I was like, "Me."
Yeah.
And after that I was like, I cannot, like, never play flute again in my life, because I don't like sitting there in the back. Like I was like, I want to be in the front, thank you. I want
Yeah.
to like be able to like express myself more than just like, because we were just like reading sheet music and playing, so it
Yeah.
wasn't really like that creative.
Mm-mm.
And so I was like, I need to do something else, but I was like, I still want to do music. And then I started taking like voice lessons, guitar lessons, piano lessons, just like a bunch of random stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, this is like, I want to do this. And we have this like cool concept in Norway where when you go to high school, you have to like apply to get into high school, like
Oh.
different high schools. And they have like, you can do like theater, you can do dance, you can do music, or you can just do like general, like, there's school.
Yeah.
But so I did like a music program there too.
Nice.
Um, and so then you like start getting to like play with other people and like getting more into it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like definitely like got me going to like wanting to go to Berkeley and all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, man, I was talking about I talked with my friend James Vincent a few weeks ago, who was the second guest on the podcast, and we had talked about like he did a similar thing like in Australia. I think you and him are about the same age. You're about a year older than me, I think. But you guys both, well, for one, you both come from countries that, have realized the importance of, a performing arts education and realize that it can be beneficial for people, which I'm from a country that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily do that. I had to do that pretty much outside of school, but yeah, it sounds really nice, and it sounds like you were more familiar with the academic side of what music can be, which was something that I came straight from public high school to Berkeley, so I didn't. That was kind of a culture shock for me. It was a pretty big one,
Yeah.
so I didn't know at all how to prepare for it. But yeah, so that must have been at least like familiar enough that you could have, made a fairly quick switch. So like what was that switch like for you? What was like coming to Berkeley like as opposed to like, your more arts education in back in Norway?
I mean, like, because I wasn't like that into it in high school. Like the whole like I was into like ensembles, private lessons, like
Yeah.
playing concerts like out on my own and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
wasn't like into like the whole like ear training, harmony, all of those
Hmm.
classes. I was like, so when can I leave? Like
Right.
I was like not at all. And then I feel like once I started Berkeley, like, there's so many talented teachers who like want to teach music. That's like
Yeah.
what they want to do. And then
Hmm.
they like maybe have like their performance stuff on the side, but they
Yeah.
like chose to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like this may be like a little harsh, but I feel like a lot of the teachers that I had in high school were like trying to make it work, but then
Right.
they needed to have like a side hustle. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
like that's like how they became teachers, and like some people were like great at it and it was fun, but other teachers you could just tell like this wasn't, like this isn't what they wanted to do. And so
Yeah.
that was kind of like not as motivating,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
And also just like having teachers who kind of see you more as like an equal and like they're like, hey, do you know anyone like who plays saxophone, like because I need someone for a gig. Like it's like
Yeah.
you're on their level and not just like you're a student, like you don't know anything kind of vibe. So
Hmm.
at least like it definitely prepared me for Berkeley and like those like more like dry, as I would say, like
Right.
classes, like, but it was just more fun at
Yeah.
Berkeley, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it, for me at least, it was like me getting older and like realizing my
Yeah.
independence and being like, oh, it's cool that, I'm, yeah. And it was kind of like an unspoken thing. Like I think that I like many other people probably just assumed that going into college would be, as like a pretty equally like rigorous, like, oh, you were a student, like, don't like cross that line kind of thing. But it
Yeah.
really changed. Like, yeah, I had a couple teachers who were like, "Oh yeah, like I need a drummer, I need a keys player. Do you want to engineer this?" Like that kind of thing. So
Exactly.
yeah, it was such a cool environment.
It's so fun. And
Yeah,
just, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it changes the dynamic. You want to work harder. And then also, like, college was like, I chose to go to college. Like,
yeah,
at least in Norway, it's like, it's not, at least I didn't feel like it's that big of a pressure
mm,
to do like an higher education
right,
because, like, education is free. So
yeah,
you can, like, anyone can choose to become a doctor. Like, you don't need to save up your entire life to send your kid to Harvard.
yeah,
It's like you can come from nothing and have good grades and get into medical school.
yeah,
And so, like, it's not like your parents worked their whole lives and then you're like, no, I want to become a musician, so I don't want to
hmm,
do school. It's like,
right,
well, anyways. So I
yeah,
feel like that was like the one thing that I like chose. And I was
hmm,
like, I want to be here. I'm paying for this class.
yeah,
So maybe I should like take an interest in it. And then I was like, okay, well, this is actually like fun. Like I'm actually learning something.
yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, huh. Wild. It must be wild going to living in a place where education is free.
It's crazy. And then I go to the US and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to pay.
Right? Oh god, yeah. It's like going
I'm
to
like, ugh.
yeah, it's like we moved from I'm from Oregon, this. I
Yeah.
think our audience knows this by now. But there's not really there's no sales tax for things in Oregon. Like you don't have to like pay
It's like
another.
Delaware.
Yeah, it's like Delaware. It's like I think it is like Oregon and Delaware and maybe I think it's like New Jersey might be it too. But it was like moving from, living in a place where you didn't have to pay sales tax to, I lived in Boston and, sales tax is there and everything is just more expensive there. So it was like,
Prices
hey,
in Boston, it's like the same as in Norway.
yeah,
Just just people don't earn as much. So it's
right.
like crazier.
Yeah, exactly. It's even more cutthroat, but yeah, that's wild. So kind of speaking of Norway, what was the music scene like when you were growing up? I know you said that, as you were, getting more into songwriting and playing live and everything, that you kind of sought those opportunities outside of school. So like, how easy was it to like find gigs? Because I know that in my own experience, you're not the only person from Norway that I knew at Berkeley. Like there were other really really talented folks there. So it must have been. I'm just curious as to what that was like when you were still back there, like growing, coming into your own as a singer songwriter.
Yeah, like for me, like not being from like Oslo, like the city, but like the suburbs,
Hmm.
it's definitely more like that feeling that like you're one of those people that everyone knows that you're into music and everyone's like, "Oh, do you want to sing here? Do you want to
Hmm.
do this?" Like
Yeah.
they kind of seek you out. You don't have to like, or at least I didn't have to when I was younger, like kind of like I didn't have to go looking for gigs. People
Hmm.
would be like, "Hey, do you want to play here? Do you want to do this? Do you want to
Yeah.
play like?" And so for me it was like fairly easy. I was like having a gig every weekend.
Yeah.
Um and at like cool places too, like cuz I used to work with this label called Tooth Fairy Label.
Hmm.
And they're like from where I'm from. And they also own this like music venue. And
Mm.
so they would just be like, whenever the genre kind of fit, they'd just be like, hey, do you want to play support? Do you want to play before this band? And it would be people like Aurora, like
Yeah.
that. Like now when I'm like, yeah, I played support for Aurora, people are like, what? And I was like, yeah, it was actually like her first like headline concert.
Yeah.
And so I was like so lucky that I could just be like, hey, is there like anyone who's going to perform? Because I really want to just play. And then they're like, yeah, you can have this weekend, this weekend, this weekend. And then I just like get to know a bunch of people too. So I think that's like a little bit different than from like if I was from Oslo, just because then it's like a little bit bigger. So then
Right.
there's like more competition. But
Yeah.
since like there's a pretty big music scene from like the little area that I'm from, like I got to like take all the jobs.
Yeah, totally. You had a monopoly over that. That yeah, no, that
Yeah.
I feel that. That's awesome. Like, yeah, it's because yeah, I would think of like I know a lot of cool like Norwegian musicians, and probably most of them may they at least like got their start somewhere like Oslo. But again, it's
Yeah.
like there's a certain amount of like prestige that comes with being a musician in like a big city. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of the same with like New York. It's like if you can make it in New York, like, it's better. But if you're in like Connecticut or whatever, it's you have an easier time because people are more willing to, book those, you know, it's kind of more like off gigs, like at a
Yeah.
coffee shop, whatever. Like, you get pretty consistent streams of opportunities from that. So yeah, I totally feel that.
I remember just like coming to Berkeley, and within like the first week, I just heard so many people say like I used to be like the star of the town, like, oh, I'm going to Berkeley. And then
Right.
they got to Berkeley, and then there's just everyone is the same as
Hmm.
you. And then you're like, but I used to be like that person that was
Yeah.
like great. And now you're just great, but with other great people.
Hmm.
And so it's like such a difference, like being like that one person who's going to Berkeley
Yeah.
versus like being there and then everyone's like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like going from the big fish in the little pond to the big fish in like the fucking ocean, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, I totally yeah, we've talked about it a lot before on this as like the amount of self hatred that kind of can come with going to a place like Berkeley. Like what was just, you don't have to get too in depth with it, but like did you feel that in some respect? Like how what was that like, making the shift at Berkeley?
Yeah, definitely. And especially before like declaring a major, like my
Mhm.
first year, I was like, what the hell am I doing? And I just keep seeing like people like recording, doing like videos and like putting shit out. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm writing songs in the practice room alone. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And I was like feeling like everyone is doing so many great things and I'm not doing that. And
Yeah.
like that definitely like got to me. And
Mhm.
then once I started doing MP&E and like getting access to the studios, I was like, well, now I can record every day if I'd
Yeah.
like. Um, and then you also like get to know people more, and then everyone is like, yeah, I've been working on this one video for like a year now and it's finally out, and then you see that people are like actually like putting in so much effort and then just releasing one thing, and then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I get it. Like I'm not like maybe as far behind as I'd think,
Yeah,
at
totally.
least.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing where like it's you're not, and I'm not saying this is at all bad. Like I know tons of people who do this all the time, but like I think I was even talking about this last week. It's kind of a thing where if you're expressing things like consistently and showing them, like how people will do like they'll post videos on Instagram or whatever just of like the like a song, like a little sketch or whatever. Like that's great and that's a good way to put it out there, but it doesn't necessarily I know that I had some issues with like, finding the worth in my projects because, not everybody was seeing them. That was
Yeah.
that was a struggle for me. So like but then it also is the fact of like, just if you are putting consistent work into what you're doing, and just because people aren't necessarily, taking notice of it all the time doesn't mean that your work is any less valuable.
Yeah, and then you get like caught up in the Berkeley bubble where it's like
Right.
how many people went to your calf show, and
Right.
then like you like measure yourself
Hmm.
like compared to like things that are just going on at Berkeley, and then you're like, but nobody cares. Like
Yeah.
that's fun and then good, but like if I'm putting stuff out on YouTube and then someone has a calf show that's dope, then it's like it's not the same, but like I would be like, oh, a lot of people came to their calf show, so my YouTube video isn't as good, or like
Mm.
shit like that. And then later I'd be like, we're just doing completely different things. And like
Yeah.
I was just like I was comparing myself to people who were like doing ensembles and performance as like their main thing, and I was like, I'm not doing shows. I should be doing shows. But then I was
Right.
like, but I don't want to do shows that
Hmm.
often. Like, why am I comparing myself to that?
Totally. It's just like it's that kind of thing. Like it's always a struggle, and you kind of have to like find your own way to deal with that. Like I have like I'm definitely gonna be. I think in the future, like hopefully not too distant future, I'm gonna start sort of making like those kind of videos just to have like a track record of like cool projects that I'm working on or whatever. Like and
Yeah.
it's and especially now because I'm not in Berkeley anymore. You're not. I don't think you're in Berkeley anymore. So it's that kind of thing where it's just using your kind of platform to achieve a similar amount of engagement with people.
Yeah, and I think also just like, because I remember I just had like that conversation with my boyfriend Diego, like
Hmm.
literally a couple of days ago, where I was texting him, like, everyone is doing so great during COVID. Everyone is like hitting 1 million streams on Spotify.
Yeah.
Everyone is doing so great. I suck. And then
Right.
he's like, no, like one person that you know just did this.
Hmm.
And like a lot of people are not. Like, it's like, people are not putting out like, yay, I haven't done anything for 2 weeks, like feeling great.
Yay, I'm super
And
depressed. Like,
yeah,
yeah,
like
exactly.
literally, like, and so we had to like have this conversation where I was like, I'm feeling like shit because I don't feel inspired to do anything.
Hmm.
And then he's like, well, I just had a couple of weeks like that, but now I'm feeling more productive. And I was like, I guess that makes sense. I just, ugh, I feel so bad. And
Right.
so, like, even after college and school, like, being an artist and like doing music, it's like you're always gonna compare yourself to like streams, plays, like how many songs people are putting out, like,
Yeah.
but it's like you don't like write on Facebook like, hey, for the past 5 months I haven't written anything and like
Yeah.
feeling great.
Yeah.
Like,
Feeling great.
and so you just have to be like, okay, well, I'm seeing all of this like great shit that like they're my friends. I should be happy for them too. But I'm
Hmm.
just there like, oh, that should have been me. Like,
Right. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, yeah, no, I feel that like to the nth degree. Like it's such a weird time. It's like some people are doing well in it. Like I think that there's equally as many, if not more people that are, really, really struggling right now. So it's that kind of thing
Yeah.
of like being okay with that and, recognizing the fact that there's a lot of stuff that still is out of our control, you know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
like, I just have to be like, okay, well, like I'm doing me. And
Yeah.
like some people who are like in LA and they have like their band who they live with who can
Mhm.
like produce music every single day and like kind of like that's a different situation. I'm not in that situation, but
Mhm.
then it could have been a lot worse too, and just kind of like talking it over with people who get it.
Mhm.
That's like so important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like having that drilled down and being like, yeah, it's, your progression is okay in whatever pace it
Yeah.
comes, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I totally feel that. That's I'm glad we talked about that because I don't think that's something that we've talked about on the podcast nearly as much. But like, yeah, yeah, folks, just take it easy on yourself. It's a weird time. It's a tough time. So just I'm trying to get all like guidance counselor right now, but I don't think it's working very well. But yeah.
But just like how like it sounds depressing, but like knowing that you're not alone and like feeling like unproductive
Yeah.
is like helping me. Like when I'm like, hey, I haven't like done anything in weeks, and then my friend's like, yeah, me neither. I'm like, great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's okay, sweet. Where there's other people struggling now, so that
Yeah.
yeah, that's I'm glad we talked about that. Yeah, totally. So moving on just a tiny bit, we had talked about, like your amount of like finding gigs and stuff, and sort of like your willingness to go out and be playing and stuff. So would you mind telling our listeners about how our paths crossed and like kind of how we met?
Yeah. I mean, we took like super fun ensemble, like mixed styles, like rock,
That's what
pop, R&B, jazz,
That's
folk,
what it
like
was. I couldn't
literally
remember the name
called
of it.
it's like literally all the genres in the world except from country,
Hmm.
like mixed styles. And I wasn't like my ratings audition like was like the worst. Like I don't I don't improvise. I don't like do shit like that. And
Mm-mm.
they're like, yeah, improvise over this jazz chord progression. I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
Whoa, whoa,
I
whoa, whoa,
was
whoa,
like,
whoa.
I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
And so it was like just random people who like I feel like we like the same type of music, a lot of
Yeah.
the same.
Hmm.
But there's definitely like I remember there's like two people that are more like into like jazz or like complete different um genre,
Yeah.
but yeah, and we were just playing random songs. Everything from like Justin Timberlake
Yeah.
to like the Bee Gees or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, we did. We
Like
did. Didn't we play Stand Alive in that ensemble?
yeah,
Yeah.
it was like we were doing so much random stuff, but I feel like I don't know, like it worked still.
Hmm.
And I was like just like impressed by how you were like because usually the drummers that I've worked with in the past, if I'm like, let's go from the second verse, they're like, okay, like they're like, what is that? Like what is the second verse? You know, but like if like the teacher is like, yeah, from the second verse, you're like, okay, like I got it, and I was like, what? A drummer that knows like what the bridge is? And like I was
Oh
like,
man.
damn. And so I just
Oh
remember
shit.
I was like, yeah, I definitely like obviously you're like an amazing drummer.
Thank you.
Um and you're a great person.
Oh, thank
And
you.
so I was like, and you like know where the second verse is. I was like, this is great.
That's all you can ask for
Yeah,
in a
and you like
collaborator.
remember like the key of the song and stuff, which I like I'm just not good with that. I'm like I'll write and
Oh
like
yeah.
I'll be like, "Oh, the capo is on the 7th fret." And
Right.
like people will be like, "What chord is that?" I'm like, "I don't know." And then you're like, "Oh, it's that song in E flat." And I'm like, "Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I see you."
I'm just remembering the times that you would accidentally put your capo on the wrong fret or something, and you'd strum one chord and we'd be like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound quite right. And I think it was either me or Nina would be like, oh, I think it's
Yeah.
one down or something, or but then again, like I was always more than down to do that. Like that's another thing is like doing something as simple as like putting a song in a different key like
I
can
mean, you're a
be.
drummer. You're fine.
I don't. Well, me, yeah, me. It doesn't matter as much for me, but like, I'm more so talking about like inspiring different ideas. Like, I think that I want to say that I remember one song. So shout out to Nina Cavallero, the one of the
Yes.
best guitarists we know.
The best.
Yeah, like I think that she did something like I forget what song it was, but we transposed it one time, and she came up with some really cool guitar riff, and then we migrated back to the original song, and we're still like, hey, can you do that just in this key or whatever? Like it was so cool, and I just remember that happening.
Yeah, like she's amazing.
Hmm.
And I just remember like in every rehearsal, like she would do something new. And I would like, after a while, I'd be like, okay, I have to record every time
Yeah.
we play because I'd have to be like, can you do this? And then like 2 seconds later, she'd be like, "What? I don't remember what I did." And so I have to be like, "Okay, well, I'll go back in the recording and I'll send it to you because that's what I want." But
Yeah.
she like wouldn't remember.
Right, exactly. That's really funny. Yeah, we recorded so consistently. Yeah, I think we'd do. Yeah, it was also just a like a record keep it like a
Yeah,
keeping tally of stuff. So yeah, that
yeah,
was so great. Yeah, so we can't shout out Nina without shouting out Muñeca Diaz,
that's true. Yeah,
the incredible bass player. Just every time, it was funny because the times that we would get, we didn't get to do that many gigs, I don't think, with Muñeca, just because she was so in demand. Everybody
yeah.
would want her
No,
to play
like
with
she was
them.
like every time I was like, "Can we rehearse this time?" She'd be like, "I actually have like 10 other rehearsals,
Right.
because I'm the best bass player." So,
Literally, yeah, the most
yeah,
like, yeah, it's she but that was the funny thing is that, and we love, shout out to Mike Ducko too,
yes,
coming through clutch, we love him, but yeah, just the fact that we would go for so long without rehearsing with Muñeca, and we would do one and she would just jump directly in and just fucking
yeah.
not miss a beat, and it was like the tightest bend, like, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I remember like when she was telling us that she was going to Valencia in Spain to
Yeah.
do like a semester, we're all crying like,
We're like, oh God.
no,
I know. I feel
don't
like it was
leave.
similar when I told you that I was gonna graduate early. I feel like it,
Yeah,
it
I
kind
was
of
like, well,
warranted the similar.
I gotta do like electronic pop now.
Oh, yeah. That's the reason you made the switch.
I was like, I don't
Oh
want to
God.
have another drummer. I
Oh
don't,
God.
no.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, so we kind of touched on it a little bit. So we talked about people who, we played in a band for, I was looking at it. I think it was close to 3 years that we played together, which is
I
pretty
think so.
crazy. Like
Yeah.
I'm trying to think in the past, like I had a couple band. I don't think any band that I was in was, nearly as, and we were all doing different stuff. So we would, take projects on and off. So it's not like we ever like ceased being a band. I kind of feel like we would meet up after a while and do rehearsals, or do a bar gig or something, but it was pretty consistent. We would do something, every month, every couple months, even if we were all doing, other projects. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's like why it worked so well too. Like everyone had like their stuff,
Yeah.
and then we were like, "Oh, but we also want to play." And
Yeah.
then we just did that together. Like at least that's like how it was for me. Like I was like
Oh,
in the
totally.
studio recording people
Hmm.
playing, but I wasn't doing it, and then I was like, "I miss you guys." And
Yeah.
and then I'd be like, "So how's the Sunday sound?" And everyone would be like, "I can't, but let's do it." Okay.
I'm gonna be an hour and a half late, but I'll come. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
Like I
that's
have to go in
hilarious.
10 minutes, but
Yeah,
I'll be there.
we've got Manieka for 2 songs, and then but
People would like come and go and like
yeah, exactly. But no, so yeah, so we had talked about all of us being a good unit, and kind of inspiring different ideas, and whether it's from songwriting or production or whatever. But so just for you specifically, are there who are like some artists who you look up to, or it can be influences, or it could even be like collaborators of yours? Who are some people who like really have shaped the way that you like create, or even like listen to music, like dissect music?
like musician like
Yeah.
Jack Johnson.
Nice.
Like I love him. I just he has this album that I can never remember the name, but it's yellow. And if you're a fan of his, you know what I'm talking
I
about,
think I
and
know which one you're talking about.
you know that like that's the album.
Right.
And like I don't know, like that's like a lot of like the direction that I was going in with like a band and everything like that.
Hmm.
Um, and it was like, because he's like a singer but guitar player too. Um, and so like all of his songs and like the way that he's writing songs as like more of like stories rather than just like randomness.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, like I've just been loving him, and it's been like that one CD that we've been like playing in the car when we've been like driving places.
Nice.
Like my dad's like, yeah, we bring the CD, and we're like, yeah, it's in the car,
The
okay.
CD.
And it's yeah,
That's
like
great.
probably like cassette, like that's how old I am.
Nice.
Um,
The 8-track,
but
yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that was like the one album that I'm like still to this day, like I love it. If I'm stuck with like production or like writing parts, I'll still go back and be like, okay, I see what you did there. Okay. Like,
Yeah, totally.
and then like other people like Sufjan Stevens,
Mm-hmm.
that are more like folky. And then like I listen to a lot of Norwegian music,
Yeah.
because it's great. Like, what can I say?
Mm-hmm.
Like Aurora, and like more like when I'm doing like my pop music, it's like Astrid S,
Mm-hmm.
Sigrid, kind of because of like their voices too. Like I don't know what it is, but a lot of people from Norway and also Sweden sound very similar.
Mm.
And we have like this like I can be like, oh, you sound like Scandinavian, and then it's like, yeah, I'm from Sweden. I'm like,
Nice.
makes sense, yeah. And so I feel like it's like the way that they're like producing around the vocal too.
Yeah.
It's like I can do that because like my voice sometimes like sound the same.
Mm.
And like they're great songwriters too, because I tend to listen to singers who write their own music,
Yeah.
rather than like people. There's nothing wrong with like not writing your own stuff.
Right,
I just
right.
tend to like listen to that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I listen to a lot of random stuff.
Yeah, totally.
It really depends.
Yeah, I feel that. Like again, and so much of it, like it inspires, different ideas in different genres. Like for
Yeah.
me, like when I was, playing drums consistently, I'd listen to, everything from like, Casey Musgraves to like, I don't even know, like Krungbin, like, that kind of weirder. Do you know Krungbin?
No.
Oh, they're so cool. Shout out Krungbin. I doubt they're listening, but if you are, they're it's so Krungbin, the name is, it's I think Vietnamese for airplane.
Okay.
Yeah, it's cool. And they're like really interesting, like kind of psychedelic, mostly instrumental, like kind of, vibey, like like old time, like almost like surf rocky in some respects, but like
That's
very
cool.
groove, like R&B centric.
Mhm.
So shout out to them. They're from Houston. But yeah, it's like and kind of what I was trying to say is that like regardless, like whatever you're listening to, like it'll inform like you're playing in one way, but it'll also like, or it'll inform your playing like more specifically in certain ways, but like in general, it's also gonna like totally shape the way you play. Like for me, something that like when we were, I played with you for 3 years, I would always consistently be changing like the way that my drums sounded. That was kind of the thing that I would do more than anything. Almost, I feel like almost more than even playing them, I would be changing what I was, how they sounded. So
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I remember like you like at some point like later on like you would have like the cymbals like so like
Yeah.
tall, and like I was like, you have to like almost stand to like hit it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you doing? You're like, I'm just trying shit out. Like I'm trying. And
Yeah.
it's like it's so fun because like you would think that like, a drum kit, it's like, especially the ones that are like in ensemble rooms, it's like you have the kit that you have and that's it.
Yeah.
But you'd still find ways to like, and bring your like little like bag with like random stuff
Yeah.
that you would just like hang places and be like, ooh,
Yeah,
this
exactly.
is fun.
I had my bag of goodies. Yeah, I'd have like
I love that.
the like African tree nuts that I'd put like on
Yes.
certain stuff, and I'd have like a bunch of weird tambourines and shit, and all my tea towels that I'd put all over everything. So yeah.
So fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's so funny. So sort of something that Just moving on a tiny bit, but something that I was curious about. So again, we've talked about it. So I, had the privilege of being your drummer on and off for 3 years, and something that I loved was even as we were playing was listening to how your sound evolved. So like when I first joined, we played pretty much folk kind of Americana tinged music, which I love deeply. But especially now with the stuff that you're putting out that we'll actually talk about in the second half of the show, it's very like sort of more on the electro pop like spectrum. So is that something that you make like a conscious decision like to lend yourself more so to this genre, or was it kind of just like a natural next step for you?
I think definitely like doing the MP&E major um like allowed me to kind of branch into that electronic pop
Yeah.
kind of genre, because in the past I've like wanted to do it, but I've been like having to depend on like having people produce
Hmm.
for me to kind of like feel like I can write music that sounds a certain way.
Right.
But once I like started producing for myself, I was like, okay, well, now I'm able to write whatever I feel like writing.
Yeah.
And then like when I started Berkeley, I listened to more like folky kind of acoustic music, whereas I like met people along the way that were more into like electronic music, and I was like, I like this too.
Yeah.
And so I tend to like write songs in the genre that like the music that I'm listening to at the moment.
Hmm.
So when I started to listen to more electronic music and electronic pop, I would just automatically start writing music that sounded like that.
Yeah.
And then I would be able to like actually produce around it, and then it just kind of like ended up like that,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's so again, like, yeah, it was so and back to sort of us playing together, it was, we really started to see that like with your stuff, like it would go from, I'll bring it back to my drumming, it would go from, wanting to have like, brushes and that kind of stuff in the music to, we were getting, we get pretty dancey near the end, which
Yeah.
which was fun. Like a lot of the songs you wrote were like, were more like backbeat driven, which was really cool. And but again, like that's something that is so consistent is just your like vocal tone and like the timbre of your voice just goes so well with like any type of music. That's my
Thank
opinion.
you.
It like regardless of, you could write like fucking dubstep and you doing a top line on it would sound really cool. And yeah, we'll actually talk about that a tiny bit after the break. Yeah, because like the work that you're doing with Diego and everything. Yeah, it's just so cool to listen to. But yeah, so we will break for just a minute, but coming up, we're gonna talk about and analyze your music more specifically. But first, I'm gonna throw to Meditation Minute. Howdy, and welcome to the ninth edition now of Meditation Minute. Thanks for to all of you for listening and everything. So yeah, the Meditation Minute I have for you this week is a fairly somewhat old recording, still sort of in the peak of the rainy season here in Seattle, as we're kind of still in it, coming out of it a little bit. We had a pretty crazy torrential downpour like over a few days, almost a week or two of that. And this was kind of honestly at a bit of a more tame part of that. There was one night where that I can specifically remember where, there were big hunks of trees from our property just coming down and hitting the house, which was a little scary if I'm being honest. But it turned out for the best. Nothing too bad is happening. The plants will definitely be happy this year. I recorded this one under the stoop in our front yard, sort of under our car park. There's a really interesting kind of drainage pipe from the gutters that went down and sort of trickled down this chain. So you'll hear that in this recording. It's really interesting, and if you at all enjoy the sound of rain, I think you will like this one. So yeah, just take a listen, let it wash over you, and enjoy. All right, and we're back. So before we kind of get into the your music specifically, like where do you find yourself the most inspired? Like where do you get ideas like that come to you in the best way? Like do you find that it's a physical place or like a state of mind maybe, or is it kind of a mixture of both?
It's whenever shitty things happen.
Mm.
like, like I'm not like I don't really write like feel good songs. Like I'm not like, yay, so happy.
Yep.
That's not like I think I've written like two songs like that and then I'm
Mhm.
like this feels weird and unfamiliar and then I
Exactly.
get like scared of it.
Yeah.
Um I'm like I write songs whenever I'm like just like sad and like shitty things are going on and
Hmm.
like just now with COVID and like me going back home because like I can work here and I can't in Boston or LA or something like that. Like
Hmm.
I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to like miss all my friends and like my boyfriends in Mexico and then I'm like, but at least there would be like a lot of songs and
Oh yeah.
material cuz I'm like this sucks. Life sucks.
Yeah.
I miss everyone. Yeah. So like at least like I get to like have something good come out of like shitty
Yeah.
situations.
Totally. Yeah, I feel that. That's hilarious. I haven't had that answer yet. I haven't had the I get most inspired when bad shit happens to me.
I
So
mean,
hope
like we're all musicians. It's like
yeah.
that's like I feel like our lives like have to be like a pain and like all about like suffering for the arts and stuff like that. Like
Making no money, fucking yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I'm like I'm
Oh god.
broke, but I'll write a song about it.
That's so funny. Yeah. That okay, cool. That's good to know. So yeah, the songs we're gonna talk about, they're both singles. One was released in I think late 2019, maybe earlier in 2019. But the one I'll talk about first was released this year, and that is Lost Without You. So
Yeah.
talk to me a tiny bit like what so I'm curious because I won't beat the dead horse on this, but I played with you for a couple years and it was so nice listening to like you like your songs and like whatever ideas you would have. But so I'm just curious, what did this song start as like an electro song or did it start like acoustic and then sort of naturally become something else? And then sort of in general, like do a lot of your songs start one way and then become like a pop banger or whatever, or do they, kind of come to you as that and then, you flush them out further?
Like specifically the Lost Without You song, it's like kind of like a funny story. So I was taking this production class at Berkeley with PC
Yeah.
Prince Charles Alexander. He's like the
Yeah.
best.
OG,
um
the best.
yeah, he's so great. And it was there are 8 spots in the class
Yeah.
per semester,
Hmm.
and my registration time for classes were always like super late and I was like,
Yeah.
why? Um, and so obviously I didn't get into the class at first. And then I had this friend who was like, I heard you wanted to take the class. I'm dropping it. So,
Mm.
I'll drop it and you can just take it. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Um, and he dropped it, and then I was gonna take it, and then it just said like it wasn't open, and I was like, what? But he just dropped it, and I had to like email the chair, and he was like, yeah, but there's a waiting list, and like, so you're not in line, like, and I was like, but he gave the spot to me, please. and and then like after like a little bit of back and forth, he was like, okay, fine, you'll be in the class.
Mm.
And it's like a class where every 2 weeks you need to have a finished song,
Yeah.
written and produced, and for some of it you needed to have a music video as well.
Wow.
So it was like the one class that I really cared about that
Mm.
semester,
Mm.
and everything else would just come in second, and I wouldn't
Right.
really care. And so this was like the second project, and I had it on Tuesdays 9 a.m. and Monday at like 9 p.m., 10 p.m. I was like, I don't have a song for tomorrow, and I need to bring in like half of the demo, so like almost finished production and written.
Mm.
And I was like, because you could choose to like have an artist and produce for them, but I was like, I want to be both because
Yeah.
I want to just give myself more work
Yeah.
for no reason. um, and so I was like, shit, like I gotta have a song for like tomorrow that he
Mhm.
can like critique like the mix and like stuff like that, and then um, and so I was like, well, I like what should I do? And so I literally was just like I was just like writing down, like putting some chords down in Logic.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, well, I guess we just
Roll
gotta
with
do
it.
this because I don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And so I would just like repeat the chords like over and over, and just that's like how I write most songs.
Mm.
And I just have like voice memo on my phone, and I just hit record, and I just literally sing like gibberish, random, some English, some not any language
Mm.
words, and just like find like melodies and certain lyrics that I like, and then I'm like, okay, well, go back, listen, write more lyrics, and within like 20 minutes I'd like written the song.
Yeah.
And then I was just like recording vocals at like 12 a.m. in my shitty apartment. And I was like, okay, like gotta be quiet because the neighbors are sleeping. I was like, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And just like being up until like 4 in the morning, um, like producing stuff around it. And that's like how that song came alive. Like I literally just didn't have a lot of time. I
Yeah.
had a deadline. Um, and then like I showed it in class, and then like PC was like, yeah, you should have like a bridge, and you should like do this and this and this, and then within 2 weeks it was all done.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So it was fun. Like that class like kicked my butt. Like it was like produce, write. But it was
Yeah.
so fun because I actually like had to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and so like if it wasn't for that class, there's a lot of songs that just wouldn't exist.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, that's so interesting that you talk about like, doing the vocals late at night in your apartment when you didn't want to, have it be too loud. Cause I can kind of, I kind of get that vibe, like listening to it. Like the vocals are very like, they're very like, they sound like they're recorded right here, which is
Yeah.
great. I love it. And it's that sort of like that intimacy, you get that it's a bit like hushed in a way. And it's really
Yeah.
like distinctive to that, obviously you got people like Billie Eilish who are making that huge now. So it's
Yeah.
it's really cool to have that like be like had you intent I mean, was that like a practical concern, or had you like intended to like evoke that kind of emotion, or
I
like what?
mean, that's like more like how I like to sing.
Yeah,
Just because I'm not like a belty kind of like I'm not like a singer. I'm more like a singer-songwriter singer. That's more like
doing
it's
runs and
more
shit.
about the vibe and the feeling than it
Yeah.
is like reaching that note or like singing like whatever
Fucking whistle tones and shit. Like, yeah.
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 So like that was definitely like that's been like, and when I write, obviously I can just like write whatever's comfortable. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna just write in this little range right here where I love to just hang out.
Yeah.
And that's just like how it's gonna be.
Totally.
And I even redid the vocals in Studio One at Berkeley, like $1 million studio. Like I was like alone in that like huge room, and I
Nice.
was just like $3,000 mic, and
Yeah.
like, but I was like, I don't know, like I'm not feeling it, and so I kept the vocals that I did in my apartment because it was
Totally.
just like the feeling was different. It just worked that way.
Yeah. Totally.
So yeah, it's also fun to see like how like because a lot of people, especially who are doing engineering, are like, oh yeah, like the studio sucks compared to this studio and like all of that, and then I'm like, but I'm doing vocals in my tiny ass apartment and it just works,
Yeah.
like because it's just like the way it sounds
Yeah. Exactly.
right in the moment.
You
Yeah.
can over mic shit. Like, you know, it's that kind of thing. Like you put a billion mics on a drum kit and you use like two of them. You know,
Yep.
it's that kind of thing. Like you regardless, like the sound, even though you're picking it up with, like you said, like $3,000 mic, like, you know, a $10,000 like recording chain, like it's always going to be bounced to a digital format, and it's always going to be able to be removed, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, so that could be like a big double-edged sword, I feel like. But yeah, for your music specifically, it's a lot of like, it's about that kind of that intimacy, and like and that's like that kind of thing is really cool to hear. Again, like I mentioned Billie Eilish, you know, there's plenty of other people. I maybe don't have the best idea of specific people, but that's definitely like it. I kind of like it kind of reverts to like the integrity of like your voice, you know, and like like it being like the central instrument in like,
Yeah.
you know, not in, you know, not even in like the most, you know, you obviously will treat it and stuff, but like it's not the most like blown out, like, you know, pristine $1 million sounding vocal, but that's the
Yeah,
emotion
no.
that it goes across as, you know.
Yeah, because it like when we did it the other time in the studio, it just felt completely different. It's like you book the studio, you have 2 hours, and then it's
Yeah.
like, oh, and like it's cold, always
Yeah,
so
it is
cold in
cold.
those studios when
Oh
it's
God.
so bad.
Yeah.
And then I'm just there like freezing, and it's like 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., and you're like, I really just want to go to Wendy's. I
Yeah.
really just want to like do anything but this right now. And then you're like all alone, and everyone else is like in another room and like listening to like just your voice, and you're like, okay, well, no pressure. Like,
Yeah.
it just changes the whole thing. And like, especially whenever, because I like recording my own vocals
Hmm.
because I'm very like, okay, I'll do it again. And then I'll just like do it really quickly. I don't like being like, hey, can we do this again? And then like 10 years later, it's like, yeah, got it. You know,
Right.
like that kind of like, it kind of ruins the emotion for
Yeah.
me, like
The
when I'm so
flow.
in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's it. Again, it's like all about the emotion. Like that. Again, it's like I've heard the thing said before. It's like, you know, great gear can make a good song sound great, but it can't make a bad song sound good. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, moving on a tiny bit, the second song is "Move On," which you actually did with our buddy Diego, your boyfriend
Yeah.
Diego, who's goes by Bloomline as a
Shout out
producer.
to him.
So yeah, so talk to me about like what it's like working in conjunction with Diego, and do you find like working with a significant other, like does that present any kind of unique challenges, or like do you guys tend to work pretty well together?
Um, I mean, I'd say like we work well together
Mhm.
when we decide to work together. Um, but we've like decided to kind of like not like we like to have like a line that's like, okay, this is like work, because when I work with people, I'm so honest.
Yeah.
Like if you were to like play something on the drums and I'd
Yeah.
hate it, I'd be like, Adam, shut up, I hate it.
And you
You
did,
suck.
and that's
You-
why I loved it. Is because you were so brutally honest about it.
And so like telling your boyfriend, like he's like sitting there with his computer and he's like trying to produce something, and I'm like, that synth sucks. Can you remove it? It needs to be gone. I hate it.
Oh my
And
God.
then him like hating to produce in front of people in general, and
Mm,
then me just sitting there like, so can we move on? Like, I hate
yeah.
that. I hate that. That sucks. Um, it's like he's like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what is happening?
Oh God.
And so I think the way that we did move on, he'd already made the whole instrumental,
Hmm.
which is normally like what he does when he works with top liners.
Yeah.
Um, and so, and usually whenever he like works on stuff, he like sends it to me and he's like, hey, what do you think? And then I'm like, it's great. Um, and so he sent it to me, and he'd originally had another vocalist in mind.
Mm.
And he was like, yeah, I'm thinking of sending it to her. And I was like, okay, like not wanting to give it to me. Okay. Like I see it. Like,
That's so funny.
and so I was like, I really like this. And then I just like sat down 10 minutes and I had like the whole thing um down, and I just sent him like a voice memo like, hey, this is an idea. Haha.
Yeah.
Like hee hee, you know? And he was like, I love it. And then we didn't have to have that like conversation, like me being like, that's synth, I don't like it. Oh, can you remove that? Oh, what are you doing? Oh,
Right.
you know, it was just like him doing his part and me doing my vocals
Yeah.
and my writing without him there too.
Hmm.
Um, and so it just kind of like worked out really
Yeah.
well. And after that, like I think I recorded the vocals the same day or something.
Nice.
And I remember like he was like, I feel like your verse sounds like a pre-chorus.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, I'm gonna hang up. I'll call you in 5. 5 minutes later, I call him. I'm like, what do you think about this? Blah, 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 you know? And he's
Yeah.
like, sure. And it was just all done like him showing me a track he was working on.
Yeah.
And me just like really vibing with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's like what we found out like works. Like when it's like you're working with your partner, it's like
Yeah.
I get really insecure when I write songs.
Hmm.
Like if I'm trying to write a song and he's just like in the background, like watching whatever YouTube, like I'm like, can you just like crank the volume, like put on a headset, because I don't like writing when you're here.
Right.
And him being the same, like I need to like produce in peace. Like he's like, I
Mm.
don't want people to listen to all of the steps that he's like taking
Yeah.
for it to become what it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's like how we managed to like work together also, because I'm just so honest with
Yeah.
what I'm feeling like even if it's like I remember one song we did like right before we got together. I was like, I love that synth. It has to stay in the song no matter what. And he was like, I don't really like it that much, but I guess. And I was like, we are keeping it.
That's
And
so
like,
funny.
you know, and so he was like, oh, I guess. And like listening back to it, I was like, why did I want to keep that? Like, it didn't even make any sense. But I was just like, we are keeping it or I'm leaving. Like, that is it.
Nice.
So I think that's also like why I'm working alone.
Yeah.
It's like a really good thing for me, because
Totally.
it's like I'm not gonna hurt anyone's feelings. I can just be like, oh, this song's trash. Well, okay, bye.
Right. That's hilarious. Yeah. So just, yeah, that's great. So just like finding that like distinction between it being, work and, even if it's with your partner, just like, having that line like kind of drawn is probably a great, like, I haven't ever like really dated anybody that's been a musician too. So I don't really have any experience with that, but, like, yeah, I would imagine like you'd want to, separate those two things from each other, even if it is your partner, like, just treating it the same as you would any other co-write, co-production, whatever. Like,
Yeah, and I think really it can like be really good and really bad at the same time. Like
Mhm.
for us, like we're both like divas who are like, okay, well, I like need my space and I need all of my stuff to be this way, and like I needed to be like me, like all of, like this, but we also understand like if like I'm in the middle of writing and he's like, "Hey, do you want to call?" and I'm like, "No, I can't talk to you right now. Bye. I'm busy." Then we both like understand why like we're
Yeah.
putting so much time and effort into like our job, because it's like not a job. Like
Yeah.
I mean it is a job, but it's like what you want. It's like your passion too.
Yeah. Totally.
And so it's like I think if like Diego were to just be like a person who would have like a 9 to 5 job and then like have all the time in the world like on weekends and stuff like that, and then for me it's like I'm working 24/7
Yeah.
as a musician, then it's like it can be hard to like understand that like difference,
Yeah. Totally.
I think.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, yeah, it brings you like I feel like it would in some respects like bring you even closer together because you guys can like
Yeah,
feel you guys like share the same amount of like devotion to your craft kind of.
this is a relationship advice podcast,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, exactly. Welcome back
Good, yeah.
to Relationship Reflections. I'm your host, Adam Daniel Jones. Yeah. So Eden, we're, you know, kind of turning around the corner. We're almost to the end of the podcast. But I was just kind of curious. You know, we had talked about it a little bit before the break, but like, what does your artistic life look like right now? Like during the pandemic? Like,
um it doesn't look like much.
mhm.
I mean I just set up an office at my parents' house,
Yeah,
which is
as
like
have
I
I.
turn yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Yours look a little bit more like producer, like
Oh, you
right
know.
now it's like not.
No, it's fair. It's a cool. You see, we both understand for our listeners. We both have plants in the back of our
Yep.
little workspaces, so I'm bad at putting where my hand is, but
I literally got this plant just yesterday.
it's perfect.
I was like, because I've been having fake plants in Boston for the longest time,
Yeah.
because I kill succulents, and like that's really hard.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I want a plant. I want a real one this time because my mom can actually help me to keep it alive.
Right.
But I went to the store and I was like, what plant is like least likely to die if I forget that it just exists? And they were like, this one is great for that. And I was like, okay, I'll have one, thanks.
Yeah.
It's like you water it every 2 weeks and it doesn't need sunlight. I was like, great, because I don't want to see the sun. There's no sun here anyways. And so I was like, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, but yeah, so like back to so like your life, what are you treating like the pandemic like? Is it are you do you have like a routine? Do you kind of struggle with finding a routine? Like what is that kind of like for you?
I have no routine.
Yeah.
I think my routine is that I have no routine.
Yeah.
But I think that's like me, like in general, like as a person. I'm not like a person that would be like, oh, I'm gonna wake up at 8 every morning
Hmm.
and then I'm gonna do this and this and this. Like I'm very much like in the moment sort of like person, I think.
Yeah.
And also with like the pandemic, like my like I like working in the night. And
Yeah.
so now I'm just like I'm up until like 4 a.m. in the morning.
Hmm.
And like there's nowhere to go or nowhere to be anyway, so it doesn't matter. So I'm
Yeah.
just like doing whatever I'm feeling like, and like producing a little bit like for other people, top lining um people's stuff, working with a new manager, which is great.
Nice.
And so like it's kind of like getting like slowly getting into it a little bit more,
Hmm.
like after like Christmas and all of that. But it's still like hard because I'm just like here far away from like most of the people that I know, like at
Yeah.
Berkeley and stuff. And so like I need to like be like, okay, you gotta go sit down and work now. And I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, but I love Netflix. Like, then I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, like maybe I should do some work. And then it's like, yeah, I'm like trying to find motivation, but it's also like so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, it's like one of the most difficult things for right now. It's like realizing that you don't have, like, I think I might have even talked about this early. I can't remember if we were recording when I said this before, but like, it's just realizing that like you know, you don't have, there's some things that are out of your control, like, you know,
Yeah,
regardless. Like for me, I feel this especially because, you know, I haven't really talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm a diabetic. Like I can't really, I'm at the point now, like I don't really feel comfortable going out getting like a day job right now
of
because
course.
like, and
Yeah.
especially in the US, like because COVID's still so terrible. So it's weird and interesting and terrible, you know, whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah.
it's not the best time right now for that kind of stuff to happen.
And
But
like the jobs that are out there too, it's like you don't want to be working at a CVS too. It's
right,
like
yeah.
because then you're so exposed. Like
Hmm.
thankfully people are doing that. But like it's still like for you especially, it's like you would want a job where you don't have to see a
Right.
million people every day.
Well, even if like I know I'm at the point where like regardless, I'll probably have to get some kind of day job, which I'm totally okay with, and I'm you know looking forward to in some respects because it'll give me, you know, time to meet new people because I kind of just came here right out of school. I don't really know, I know very few people up in this, you know, in Seattle. So
Yeah.
but you know, it's, I just am being very cautious about like going out and doing that stuff. So yeah, it's a weird time, but you know, we're taking it as we can. So
Yeah.
yeah. So one last thing, Eden, before we leave, what is kind of your advice? Like, what would you give? Like, what kind of advice would you give for people that, you know, want to get into production or songwriting or, you know, playing an instrument, being a singer, whatever? Like, and this can be, you know, for, you know, during COVID, this can be before COVID, this can be post COVID, this can be whatever. Like, what would you suggest people do?
I mean, for me, like it was just like not being afraid of like making stuff that like didn't sound like that good, but it
Mm,
was like creative. So
yeah.
like when I started producing before Berkeley, um my dad bought me Cubase.
Mm,
And that's like pretty like for a beginner when you're like 15, it's like
right.
not like the best way to start recording. I was like I don't know anything.
Mm,
Um and then later I was like, "Oh, Logic, there's like a thing that like makes more sense." Like
right.
um and so for me it wasn't like making stuff that needed to sound like a record. It was more like recording whatever at whatever level I was on
Hmm.
and just for like me to like have like okay, now I've written 3 songs and now I know kind of what I want them to sound like, and then if I found other people to play with or whatever, I could like show them a demo.
Yeah.
Um I don't know, like advice, I'm so like I don't know what I'm doing. Like I guess like just like I felt like I was just like comparing myself to like big time producers, and then I'm
Mhm.
like, well, I'm not there yet. Like and even just like the class that I mentioned with PC, I was like, oh, I'm so scared of taking it because I don't feel like I'm that good of a producer. And then I'm like, wait, it's a class to
Right.
learn. And I'm
Hmm.
like, what am I, why am I scared to like take the class? And so I think just like for me, it was like pushing myself a little bit out of my own comfort zone and like not
Yeah.
thinking that everything has to be perfect, right?
Yeah,
Like
totally.
when you started, and like with songwriting too, like I've never written in my native language. I've always written in English.
Yeah.
Um and so like when I started writing songs, like it made no sense
Mhm.
cuz like I wasn't that like great at English, like like writing it and like grammar and all of that. And so like I even have like some songs that I'm like, what was I, what? And like, just like, this makes no sense, but that's like, that's where I started, and now it's like gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
And so like for people who are like, oh, I don't know, like I'm not like a songwriter, like I'm more just like even like my boyfriend Diego, like he's like, I want to like write songs, but I don't know, like I don't know, like how do you do it? And it's like, well, you have to start somewhere, like,
Yeah.
and even if it's not maybe like the biggest hit, like it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
And maybe you're just like super talented and it's a hit, but
Yeah, exactly. Just taking it at, you know, at a pace that's good for you, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, definitely. I totally feel that. Well, Eden, thanks so much for being the guest on this week's episode. It was so nice to see your face, nice to talk to you. Real quick, where can our audience like find you and your music?
Spotify, Tidal, YouTube, Apple Music.
Yeah.
Whatever. Any platform, as
Perfect.
they say, you know.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll have a bunch of your stuff linked in the description of this too. So yeah, so this has been Early Reflections. I'm Adam Daniel Jones. Find us on Facebook at Early Reflections with Adam Daniel Jones. Find us on Instagram at Early Reflections Pod, all lowercase. I personally am on Instagram at Adam Daniel Jones, all lowercase. And please remember that Early Reflections have an important role in determining the sound and character of the space. See you soon.